clam chowder in a bread bowl. I'm like super delicious.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it was really good. Probably didn't need that much soup, but felt good. Felt good to eat. And the bread. Probably way too much bread. Anywho, let's get rolling. It's about dead time. Well, it's past that. But
Yeah, sorry.
no, it's fine. Wasn't ready either. I went and took care of some other stuff while getting set up. Which means we're gonna get rolling. So where we had left off, thank you, phone. We had left off meeting Aziraphale and Crowley, them being informed that the Antichrist would be born, and in 13 years the world would end, and their decision to work together to bring about making sure that that didn't happen. They had planned to motivate the Antichrist into being better, and hopefully, at the very least, delay Armageddon. They ended up finding out that their efforts were in vain, as they got the wrong child, and the Hellhound arrived to meet its destiny. And so, we'll pick up where we left off.
So,
Mm-hmm.
just so I'm clear, I know where things stand. The nurse didn't get the babies right.
Mm-hmm. That's why they had the joke of doing the pea cup shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they did not grab the right child because the one who talked too much had mixed up the babies when she pushed the two together in the first room, and then when they had the winking exchange, they wheeled out the wrong one and brought that into a room with two others, and they wheeled that one out, and so yeah, it all got mixed up.
So, basically, all of heaven and hell thinks that that baby is the right baby, but it's the wrong baby.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
So then the Hellhound went to...
The correct.
Oh.
The Hellhound is bred to know where the Antichrist is and answer only its call. And so...
Dog.
Yep, dog. Its destiny is to be a dog. So that boy is the real Antichrist, and he is living a perfectly normal life outside of the influence of heaven and hell.
That's all I need.
Mm-hmm. You said it was him, moaned Aziraphale, abstractedly picking the final lump of cream cake from his lapel. He licked his fingers clean. It was him, said Crowley. I mean, I should know, shouldn't I? Then someone else must be interfering. There isn't anyone else. There's just us, right? Good and evil. One side or the other. He thumped the steering wheel. You'll be amazed at the kind of things they can do to you down there, he said. I imagine they're very similar to the sort of things they can do to one up there, said Aziraphale. Come off it. You're a lot to get ineffable mercy, said Crowley sourly. Yes? Did you ever visit Gomorrah? Sure, said the demon. There was this great little tavern where you could just get these terrific fermented date palm cocktails with nutmeg and crushed lemongrass. I meant afterwards. Oh, Aziraphale said. Something must have happened in the hospital. It couldn't have. It was full of our people. Whose people? Aziraphale said coldly. My people, corrected Crowley. Well, not my people. You know, Satanists. He tried to say it dismissively, apart from, of course, the fact that the word was in an amazingly interesting place. The world was in an amazingly interesting place, which they both wanted to enjoy for as long as possible. There were few things that the two of them agreed on, but they did see eye to eye about some of those people who, for one reason or another, were inclined to worship the Prince of Darkness. Crowley always found them embarrassing. You couldn't actually be rude to them, but you couldn't help feeling about them the same way that, say, a Vietnam veteran would feel about someone who wears combat gear to neighborhood watch meetings. Besides, they were always so depressingly enthusiastic. Like all that stuff with their inverted crosses and pentagrams and cockerels, it mystified most demons. It wasn't the least bit necessary. All you needed to become a Satanist was an effort of will. You could be one all your life without ever knowing what a pentagram was, without ever seeing a dead cockerel, other than as chicken Marengo. Besides, some of the old-style Satanists tended, in fact, to be quite nice people. They mouthed the words and went through the motions, just like the people they thought of as their opposite numbers, then went home and lived lives of mild, unamusing mediocrity for the rest of the week, with never an unusually evil thought in their heads. And as for the rest of it, there were people who called themselves Satanists who made Crowley squirm. It wasn't just the things they did, it was the way they blamed it all on hell. They'd come up with some stomach-churning idea that no demon could have thought of in 1,000 years. Some dark and mindless unpleasantness that only a fully functioning human brain could conceive, then shout, "The devil made me do it," and get sympathy of the court, when the whole point was that the devil hardly ever made anyone do anything. He didn't have to. That was what some humans found hard to understand. Hell wasn't a major reservoir of evil, any more than heaven, in Crowley's opinion, was a fountain of goodness. They were just sides in the great cosmic chess game, where you found the real McCoy, the real grace, the real heart-stopping evil was right inside the human mind. Huh, said Aziraphale. Satanists. I don't see how they could have messed it up, said Crowley. I mean, 2 babies. Not exactly taxing, is it? He stopped. Through the mists of memory, he pictured a small nun, which struck him at the time as being remarkably loose-headed even for a Satanist. And there had been someone else. Crowley vaguely recalled a pipe and a cardigan, with the kind of zigzag pattern that went out of style in 1938. A man with expectant father written all over him. Excuse me. Do you need to drink so loudly, Nico? He didn't even stop. He just kept going. Sorry, my dog is very loud when he drinks. Where are we? There must have been a 3rd baby, he told Aziraphale. Not a lot to go on, said the angel. We know the child must be alive, said Crowley. So, how do we know? If it had turned up down there again, you'd think I'd still be sitting here. Good point. So all we've got to do is find it. Go through the hospital records. The Bentley engine coughed into life and the car leapt forward, forcing Aziraphale back into the seat. "And then what?" he said. "And then we find the child." "And then what?" The angel shut his eyes as the car crabbed around a corner. "Don't know." "Good grief." "I suppose." "Get off the road, you clown. I suppose. Get off the road, you clown. Your people wouldn't consider. And the scooter you rode on, giving me asylum." "I was going to ask you the same thing. Watch out for the pedestrian!" "It's on the street. It knows the risk it's taking," said Crowley, easing the accelerating car between a parked car and a taxi and leaving a space which would have barely accepted even the best credit card. Wow. Watch the road, watch the road! Where is this hospital anyway?" "Somewhere south of Oxford." Aziraphale grabbed the dashboard. "You can't do 90 miles an hour in central London." Crowley peered at the dial. "Why not?" he said. "You'll get us all killed." Aziraphale hesitated. "Inconveniently discorporated," he corrected, lamely, relaxing a little. "Anyway, you might kill other people." Crowley shrugged. The angel had never really come to grips with the 20th century and didn't realize that it is perfectly possible to do 90 miles an hour down Oxford Street. You just arranged matters so that no one was in the way. And since everyone knew that it was impossible to do 90 miles an hour down Oxford Street, no one noticed. At least cars were better than horses. The internal combustion engine had been a windfall for Crowley. The only horses he could be seen riding on business in the old days were big black jobs with eyes like flame and hooves that struck sparks. That was de rigueur, something French, rigueur, for a demon. Usually, Crowley fell off. He wasn't much good with animals. Somewhere around Chiswick, Aziraphale scrabbled vaguely in the scree of tapes in the glove compartment. "What's a velvet underground?" he said. "You wouldn't like it," said Crowley. "Oh," the angel said dismissively. "Bebop." "Do you know, Aziraphale, that probably in a million human beings were asked to describe modern music, they wouldn't use the term bebop," said Crowley. "Ah, this is more like it. Tchaikovsky. Never been good at pronouncing that guy's name. Tchaikovsky.
It's a difficult one.
Yeah, Tchaikovsky. Said Aziraphale, opening the case and slotting its cassette into the I don't know why he insists on using this word either. Just call it a tape player. The blah punct. "You won't enjoy it," sighed Crowley. "It's been in the car for more than a fortnight." A heavy bass beat began to thump through the Bentley as they sped past Heathrow. Aziraphale's brow furrowed. "I don't recognize this," he said. "What is it?" "It's Tchaikovsky's. Another one bites the dust," said Crowley, closing his eyes as they went through the slough. To while away the time as they crossed the sleeping children's, they also listened to William Byrd's "We Are the Champions" and Beethoven's "I Want to Break Free." Neither were as good as Vaughan Williams' "Fat-Bottomed Girls." It is said that
I like that all these classical artists have contemporary songs.
No, did you miss the joke from earlier? Everything that plays through the demon radios gets converted to Queen.
Oh, right. Forgot about that.
Yeah, Tchaikovsky. Thank you, Frost. It is said that the devil has all the best tunes. This is broadly true, but heaven has the best choreographers. The Oxford Plains stretched out to the west with a scattering of lights to mark the slumbering villages, where honest yeomen were settling down to sleep after a long day's editorial direction, financial consulting, or software engineering. Up here on the hill, a few glowworms were lighting up. The surveyor's theodolite is one of the more direful symbols of the 20th century. Set up anywhere in an open countryside, it says, there will come road widenings, yea, and 2,000 home estates in keeping with the essential character of the village. Executive developments will be manifest. But not even the most conscientious surveyor surveys at midnight, and yet here the thing was, tripod legs deep in the turf. Not many theodolites have a hazel twig strapped to the top either, or crystal pendulums hanging from them, and Celtic runes carved into the legs. The soft breeze flapped the cloak of the slim figure who was adjusting the knobs of the thing. It was quite a heavy cloak, sensibly waterproof, with a warm lining. Most books on witchcraft will tell you that witches work naked. This is because most books on witchcraft are written by men. The young woman's name was Anathema Device. She was not astonishingly beautiful. All her features considered individually were extremely pretty, but the entirety of her face gave the impression that it had been put together hurriedly from stock without reference to any plan. Probably the most suitable word is attractive, although people who knew what it meant and could spell it might add vivacious, although there is something very 50s about vivacious, so perhaps they wouldn't. Young women should not go alone on dark nights, even in Yorkshire, but any prowling maniac would have had more than his work cut out if he had accosted Anathema Device. She was a witch, after all, and precisely because she was a witch, and therefore sensible, she had put a little faith in protective amulets and spells. She saved it all for a foot-long bread knife which she kept in her belt. She sighted through the glass and made another adjustment. She muttered under her breath. Surveyors often mutter under their breath. They mutter things like, "Soon have a relief road through here faster than you can say Jack Robinson," or, "That's 3.5 meters, give or take a gnat's whisker." This was an entirely different kind of muttering. "Darksome night and shining moon," muttered Anathema. "East by south, by west by southwest, southwest. Got you." She picked up a folded ordnance survey map and held it in torchlight. Then she produced a transparent ruler and a pencil and carefully drew a line across the map. It intersected another pencil line. She smiled. Not because anything was particularly amusing, but because a tricky job had been done well. Then she collapsed the strange theodolite, strapped it onto the back of a sit-up and beg black bicycle leaning against the hedge, and made sure the book was in the basket, and wheeled everything out to the misty lane. It was a very ancient bike, with a frame apparently made of drain pipes. It had been built long before the invention of the 3-speed gear, and possibly only just after the invention of the wheel. But it was nearly all downhill to the village, hair streaming in the wind, cloak ballooning behind her like a sheet anchor. She let the 2-wheeled juggernaut accelerate ponderously through the warm air. At least there wasn't any traffic at this time of night. The Bentley's engine went pink as it cooled. Crowley's temper, on the other hand, was heating up. You said you saw a signpost, he said. Well, we flashed by it so quickly. Anyway, I thought you'd been here before. 11 years ago! Crowley hurled the map onto the back seat and started the engine again. Perhaps we should ask someone, said Aziraphale. Oh, yes, said Crowley. We'll stop and ask the first person we see walking along a track in the middle of the night, shall we? He jerked the car into gear and roared out into the beach-hung lane. There's something odd about this area, said Aziraphale. Can't you feel it? What? Slow down a moment. The Bentley slowed again. Odd, muttered the angel. I keep getting these flashes of... He raised his hands to his temple. What? What? Said Crowley. Aziraphale stared at him. Love, he said. Someone really loves this place. Pardon? There seems to be this great sense of love. I can't put it any better than that, especially not with you. Do you mean like... Crowley began. There was a whir, a scream, and a clunk. The car stopped. Aziraphale blinked, lowered his hands, and gingerly opened the door. You've hit someone, he said. No, I haven't, said Crowley. Someone's hit me. They got out. Behind the Bentley, a bicycle lay on the road, its front wheel bent into a credible Mobius shape, its back wheel clicking ominously to a standstill. Let there be light, said Aziraphale. A pale blue glow filled the lane. From the ditch beside them, someone said, How the hell did you do that? The light vanished. Do what? Said Aziraphale guiltily. Now the voice sounded muzzy. I think I hit my head on something. Crowley glared at a long metallic streak on the Bentley's glossy paintwork and a dimple in the bumper. The dimple popped back into shape. The paint healed. Up you get, young lady, said the angel, hauling Anathema out of the bracken. No bones broken. It was a statement, not a hope. There had been no minor fracture, but Aziraphale couldn't resist the opportunity to do good. Or there had been a minor fracture. You didn't have any lights, she began. Nor did you, said Crowley guiltily. Fair's fair. Doing a spot of astronomy, were we? Said Aziraphale. Setting the bike upright, various things clattered out of its front basket. He pointed to the battered theodolite. No, said Anathema. I mean, yes. And look what you've done to poor old Phaeton. I'm sorry. My bicycle. It's bent to all... Amazingly resilient, these old machines, said the angel, brightly handing it to her. The front wheel gleamed in the moonlight as perfectly round as one of the circles of hell. She stared at it. Well, since that's all sorted out, said Crowley, perhaps it'd be best if we got on our... You wouldn't happen to know the way to Lower Tadfield, would you? Anathema was still staring at her bicycle. She was almost certain that it hadn't had a little saddlebag with a puncture repair kit when she set out. It's just down the...
Sorry.
That's okay. It's just down the hill, she said. This is my bike, isn't it? Oh, certainly, said Aziraphale, wondering if he'd overdone things. Only, I'm sure Phaeton never had a pump. The angel looked guilty again. But there's a place for one, he said helplessly. 2 little hooks. Just down the hill, you said Crowley, nudging the angel. I think perhaps I must have knocked my head, said the girl. We'd offer to give you a lift, of course, Crowley said quickly, but there's nowhere for the bike. Except the luggage rack, said Aziraphale. Bentley hasn't... Oh. The angel scrambled the spilled contents of the bike basket into the back seat and helped the stunned girl in after them. One does not, he said to Crowley, pass by on the other side. Your one might not. This one does. We have got other things to do, you know. Crowley glared at the new luggage rack. It had tartan straps. The bicycle lifted itself up and tied itself firmly in place, and Crowley got in. Where do you live, my dear? Aziraphale oozed. My bike didn't have lights either. Well, it did, but they're the sort you have to put those double batteries in, and they went moldy, and I took them off. Anathema. She glared at Crowley. I have a bread knife, you know. Somewhere. Aziraphale looked shocked at the implication. Madam, I assure you. Crowley switched on the lights. He didn't need them to see by, but they made the other humans on the road less nervous. Then he put the car into gear and drove sedately down the hill. The road came out from under the trees and after a few hundred yards reached the outskirts of a middle-sized village. It had a familiar feel to it. It had been 11 years, but this place definitely rang a distant bell. Is there a hospital around here? He said. Run by nuns? Anathema shrugged. I don't think so, she said. The only large place is Tadfield Manor. I don't know what goes on there. Divine planning, muttered Crowley under his breath. And gears, said Anathema. My bike didn't have gears. I'm sure my bike didn't have gears. Crowley leaned across to the angel. Oh Lord, heal this bike, he whispered sarcastically. I'm sorry, I just got carried away, hissed Aziraphale. Tartan straps? Tartan is stylish. Crowley growled. On those occasions when the angel managed to get his mind into the 20th century, it always gravitated to 1950. You can drop me off here, said Anathema, from the back seat. Our pleasure, beamed the angel. As soon as the car had stopped, he had the back door open and was bowing like an aged retainer welcoming the young massa back to the old plantation. Wow. Anathema gathered her things together and stepped out as haughtily as possible. She was quite sure neither of the two men had gone around to the back of the car, but the bike was unstrapped and leaning against the gate. There was definitely something very weird about them, she decided. Aziraphale bowed again. So glad to have been of assistance, he said. Thank you, said Anathema icily. And we get on, said Crowley. Good night, miss. Get in, angel. Ah, well, that explained it. She had been perfectly safe after all. She watched the car disappear towards the center of the village and wheeled the bike up the path to the cottage. She hadn't bothered to lock it. She was sure that Agnes would have mentioned it if she was going to get it burgled. She was always very good at personal things like that. She'd rented the cottage furnished, which meant that the actual furniture was the special sort you find in these circumstances and had probably been left out for the dustman by the local war on want shop. British idioms. It didn't matter. She didn't expect to be here long. If Agnes was right, it wouldn't be anywhere long, nor would anyone else. She spread her maps and things out on the ancient table under the kitchen's solitary light bulb. What had she learned? Nothing much, she decided. Probably it was at the north end of the village, but she suspected that anyways. If you got too close, the signal swamped you. If you were too far away, you couldn't get an accurate fix. It was infuriating. The answer must be in the book, somewhere. The trouble was that in order to understand the predictions, you had to be able to think like a half-crazed, highly intelligent 17th century witch with a mind like a crossword puzzle dictionary. Other members of the family had said that Agnes made things obscure to conceal them from the understanding of the outsiders. Anathema who suspected she could occasionally think like Agnes, had privately decided that it was because Agnes was a bloody-minded old bitch with a mean sense of humor. She didn't have the book. Anathema stared in horror at the things on the table. The maps, the homemade divinatory theodolite thermos that had contained hot bovril, the torch. The rectangle of empty air where the prophecies should have been. She'd lost it. That was ridiculous. One of the things Agnes was always very specific about was what happened to the book. She snatched up the torch and ran from the house. A feeling like, the opposite of the feeling you're having when you say things like, "This feels spooky," said Aziraphale. That's what I meant. I never say things like, "This feels spooky," said Crowley. I'm all for spooky. A cherished feeling, Aziraphale said desperately. Nope, can't sense a thing, said Crowley with forced jolliness. You're just oversensitive. It's my job, said Aziraphale. Angels can't be oversensitive. I expect people around here like living here, and you're just picking it up. Never picked up anything like this in London, said Aziraphale. There you are, then. Proves my point, said Crowley. And this is the place. I remember the stone lions on the gateposts. The Bentley's headlights lit up the groves of overgrown rhododendrons that lined the drive. The tires crunched over gravel. It's a bit early in the morning to be calling on nuns, said Aziraphale doubtfully. Nonsense. Nuns are up and about at all hours, said Crowley. It's probably Compline, unless that's a slimming aid. Oh, cheap. Very cheap, said the angel. There's really no need for that sort of thing. Don't get defensive, I told you. These were some of ours. Black nuns. We needed a hospital close to the airbase, you see. You've lost me there. You don't think American diplomats' wives usually give birth in little religious hospitals in the middle of nowhere, do you? It all had to seem to happen naturally. There's an air base at Lower Tadfield. She went there for the opening. Things started to happen. Base hospital not ready. Our man there said, there's a place just down the road. And there they were. Rather good organization. Except for one or two minor details, said Aziraphale smugly. But it nearly worked, snapped Crowley, feeling he should stick up for the old firm. You see, evil always contains some seeds of its own destruction, said the angel. It is ultimately negative and therefore encompasses its downfall, even at its moments of apparent triumph. No matter how grandiose, how well-planned, how apparently foolproof an evil plan, the inherent sinfulness will pay... Oh, I lost my spot.
Oh.
No matter how grandiose, how well-planned, how apparently foolproof an evil plan, the inherently sinfulness will by definition rebound upon its instigators. No matter how apparently successful it may seem upon the way, at the end it will wreck itself. It will founder upon the rocks of inquiry and sink headfirst to vanish without a trace into the seas of oblivion. Hold on.
Go stop.
Alright.
Okay.
Fiona was barking about something, but nobody else got up to go see. She must be...
Figured that was...
Well, it's like, usually when one of them barks, the other two will bark if there's something. But she was just barking at nothing, apparently. And now she's looking at me expectantly like she wants praise. Anyways. Crowley considered this. Nah, he said at last. For my money, it was just average incompetence. Hey, he whistled under his breath. The gravelled forecourt in front of the manor was crowded with cars, and they weren't nun cars. The Bentley was, if anything, outclassed. A lot of the cars had GT or Turbo in their names, and phone aerials on the roofs. They were nearly all less than a year old. Crowley's hands itched. Aziraphale healed the bicycles and broken bones. He longed to steal a few radios. Let down some tires, that sort of thing. He resisted it. Well, he said. In my day, nuns were packed 4 to a Morris traveler. This can't be right, said Aziraphale. Perhaps they've gone private, said Crowley. Or you've got the wrong place. It's the right place, I tell you. Come on. They got out of the car. 30 seconds later, someone shot both of them with incredible accuracy.
Nuns with gun.
Nuns with gun.
Add the idea of doing that as like a cleric or something.
I mean, there is the there's that one anime too.
Or it's terrible anime. It is terrible.
But it had a nun with guns.
Well, which one are we talking about? Are we talking about the more comedic version or the pirate?
It's the pirate one.
Oh, no, that one was good.
Yeah, what's the comedic one?
The comedic one turned out to be not very comedic, and the ending was terrible. I forget what it was called. Oh. Chrono Crusade, that's what it was.
Oh, yeah. Chrono Crusade is not very good.
That was horrible.
I mean, there's also...
It's like, it started decent, and then it just devolved rapidly.
Yeah. I mean, there's also Hellsing technically, because you do get nuns with guns in there. Heinkel is a Vatican assassin who uses 2 guns, but she gets like her cheeks blown out at the end, and her nun katana wielding girlfriend gets murderated. So. What was
the pirate one called again? I know that one.
I can't think of it. Really I can't think of it, but yeah.
It's gonna come to me.
Anyways, yeah.
But
I know that it's like, yeah, that one. But yeah, there's like a Spanish nun who uses Asian Spanish because it's anime. But you know, anyways.
So like the older lady who just has that stockpile of arms.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're arms dealers.
Yep.
It's like, oh, don't forget to leave a donation on the way out.
Yep. Alright, let's continue. If there was one thing that Mary Hodges, formerly loquacious, was good at, it was attempting to obey orders. She liked orders. They made the world a simpler place. What she wasn't good at was change. She'd really liked the Chattering Order. She'd made friends for the first time. She'd had a room of her own for the first time. Of course, she knew that it was engaged in things which might, from certain viewpoints, be considered bad. But Mary Hodges had seen quite a lot of life in 30 years, and had no illusions about what most of the human race had to do in order to make it from one week to the next. Besides, the food was good, and you got to meet interesting people. The order, such as was left of it, had moved after the fire. After all, their sole purpose in existing had been fulfilled. They went their separate ways. She hadn't gone. She had rather liked the manor, and, she said, someone ought to stay and see it was properly repaired, because you couldn't trust workmen these days unless you were on top of them the whole time. In a manner of speaking. This meant breaking her vows. Giggity. But Mother Superior said this was all right. Nothing to worry about. Breaking vows was perfectly okay, in a black sisterhood, and it would all be the same in 100 years' time, or rather 11 years' time. So if it gave her any pleasure here were the deeds and address to forward any mail... If her any pleasure here were the deeds and an address to forward any mail, unless it came in long brown envelopes with windows in the front. Then something very strange had happened to her. Left alone in the rambling building, working from one of the few undamaged rooms, arguing with men with cigarette stubs behind their ears and plaster dust on their trousers, and a kind of pocket calculator that comes up with different answers if its sums involved are in used notes, she discovered something she never knew existed. She discovered, under layers of silliness and eagerness to please, Mary Hodges. She'd found it quite easy to interpret builders' estimates and do VAT calculations. She'd got some books from the library and found finance to be both interesting and uncomplicated. She'd stopped reading the kind of women's magazines that talk about romance and knitting, and started reading the kinds of women's magazines that talked about orgasms. But apart from making a mental note to have one if ever the occasion presented itself, she dismissed them as only romance and knitting in a new form. So she'd started reading the kind of magazine that talked about mergers. After much thought, she'd bought a small home computer from an amused and condescending young dealer in Norton. After a crowded weekend, she took it back. Not, as he thought when she walked back into the shop, to have a plug put on it, but because it didn't have the 387 coprocessor. That bit he understood. He was a dealer, after all, and could understand quite long words. But after the conversation rapidly went downhill from his viewpoint, Mary Hodges produced yet more magazines. Most of them had the term PC somewhere written on the title, and many of them had articles and reviews that she had circled carefully in red ink. She had read about new women. She hadn't ever realized that there had been an old woman. But after some thought, she decided that titles like that were all one with the romance and the knitting and the orgasms. And the really important thing was to be yourself, just as hard as you could. She'd always been inclined to dress in black and white. All she needed to do was raise the hemlines, raise the heels, leave off the wimple. It was while leafing through a magazine one day that she learned that, around the country, there was an apparently insatiable demand for commodious buildings in spacious grounds run by people who understood the needs of the business community. The following day she went out and ordered some stationery in the name of the Tadfield Manor Conference and Management Training Center, reasoning that by the time it had been printed, she'd know all that was necessary to know about running such places. The ads went out the following week. It had turned out to be an overwhelming success because Mary Hodges realized early in her career as herself that management training didn't have to mean sitting people down in front of unreliable slide projectors. Firms expected far more from that these days. She provided it. Crowley sank down with his back against a statue. Aziraphale had already toppled backwards into the rhododendron bush, a dark stain spreading across his coat. Crowley felt dampness suffusing his own shirt. This was ridiculous. The last thing he needed now was to be killed. It would require all sorts of explanations. They didn't hand out new bodies just like that. They always wanted to know what you'd done with the old one. It was like trying to get a new pen from a particularly bloody-minded stationery department. He looked at his hand in disbelief. Demons have to be able to see in the dark, and he could see that his hand was yellow. He was bleeding yellow. Gingerly, he tasted a finger. Then he crawled over to Aziraphale and checked the angel's shirt. If the stain on it was blood, something had gone very wrong with biology. "Oh, that stung," moaned the fallen angel. "Cut me right under the ribs." "Yes, but do you normally bleed blue?" said Crowley. Aziraphale's eyes opened. His right hand patted his chest. He sat up. He went through the same crude forensic self-examination as Crowley. "Paint?" he said. Crowley nodded. "What are they playing at?" said Aziraphale. "I don't know," said Crowley, "but I think it's called Silly Buggers." His tone suggested that he could play, too, and do it better. It was a game. It was tremendous fun. Nigel Tompkins, assistant head purchasing, squirmed through the underbrush, his mind aflame with some of the more memorable scenes of some of the better Clint Eastwood movies. And to think he'd believed that management training was going to be boring, too. There had been a lecture, but it had been about the paint guns and all the things you should never do with them, and Tompkins had looked at the fresh young faces of his rival trainees, as, to a man, they resolved to do them all if there was half a chance of getting away with it. If people told you business was a jungle and then put a gun in your hand, then it was pretty obvious to Thompson that they weren't expecting you to simply aim for the shirt. What it was all... gosh, I can't read today. What it was all about was the corporate head hanging over your fireplace. Anyway, it was rumored that someone over in United Consolidation had done his promotion prospects a considerable amount to paint to an immediate superior, causing the latter to complain of little ringing noises in important meetings and eventually to be replaced on medical grounds. And there was his fellow trainees, fellow sperms, to switch metaphors, all struggling forward in the knowledge that there could only be one chairman of Industrial Holdings Holding, PLC, and that the job would probably go to the biggest prick. Of course, some girl with a clipboard from personnel had told them that the courses they were going on were just to establish leadership potential, group cooperation, initiative, and so on. The trainees had tried to avoid one another's faces. It had worked out quite well so far. The whitewater canoeing had taken care of Johnston, punctured eardrum, and the mountain climbing in Wales had done for Whitaker, groin strain. Tompkins thumbed another paint pellet into the gun and muttered business mantras to himself. Do unto others before they do unto you. Kill or be killed. Either shit or get out of the kitchen. Survival of the fittest. Make my day. He crawled a little nearer to the figures by the statue. They didn't seem to have noticed him. When the available cover ran out, he took a deep breath and leapt to his feet. "Okay, douchebags, grab some oh no." Where one of the figures had been, there was something dreadful. He blacked out. Crowley restored himself to his favorite shape. "I hate having to do that," he murmured. "I'm always afraid I'll forget how to change back, and it can ruin a good suit." "I think the maggots were a bit over the top myself," said Aziraphale, without much rancor. Angels had a certain moral standard to maintain, and so, unlike Crowley, he preferred to buy his clothes rather than wish them into being from raw firmament. And the shirt had been quite expensive. "I mean, just look at it," he said. "I'll never get the stain out." "Miracle it away," said Crowley, scanning the undergrowth for Any more management trainees? Yes. But I'll always know the stain was there, you know. Deep down, I mean, said the angel. He picked up the gun and turned it over in his hands. I've never seen one of these before, he said. There was a pinging noise, and a statue beside him lost an ear. Let's not hang around, said Crowley. He wasn't alone. This is a very odd gun, you know. Very strange. I thought you side disapproved of guns, said Crowley. He took the gun from the angel's plump hand and sighted along the stubby barrel. Current thinking favors them, said Aziraphale. They lend weight to moral argument. In the right hands, of course. Yeah? Crowley snaked a hand over the metal. That's all right, then. Come on. My argument is more valid. I have a gun.
It shoots me.
He dropped the gun onto the recumbent form of Tompkins and marched away across the damp lawn. The front door of the manor was unlocked. The pair of them walked through unheeded. Some plump young men in army fatigues, spattered with paint, were drinking cocoa out of mugs in what had once been the sisters' refectory, and one or two of them gave them a cheery wave. Something like a hotel reception desk now occupied one end of the hall. It had a quietly competent look. Aziraphale gazed at the board on an aluminum easel beside it. Little plastic letters let into the black fabric on the board were the words August 20th to the 21st, United Holdings Holding, PLC, Initiative Combat Course. Meanwhile, Crowley had picked up a pamphlet from the desk. It showed glossy pictures of the manor, with special references to its jacuzzi and indoor heated swimming pool. And on the back was a sort of map that conference centers always have, which makes use of careful misscaling to suggest that it is handy for every motorway exit in the nation, while carefully leaving out the labyrinthine of country lanes that in fact surround it for miles on every side. Wrong place, said Aziraphale. No. Wrong time, then. Yes. Crowley leafed through the booklet in hopes of any clue. Perhaps it was too much to hope that the Chattering Order would still be here. After all, they'd done their bit. He hissed softly. Probably they'd gone to darkest America or somewhere to convert the Christians. But he read on anyway. Sometimes this sort of leaflet had a little historical bit, because the kind of companies that hired places like this for a weekend of interactive personnel analysts, or a conference on the strategic marketing dynamic, liked to feel like they were strategically interacting in the very building, give or take a couple of complete rebuildings, a civil war, and 2 major fires that some Elizabethan financier had endowed as a plague hospital. Not that he was actually expecting a sentence like, until 11 years ago, the manor was used as a convent by an order of satanic nuns who weren't, in fact, all that good at it, really. But you never knew. A plump man wearing desert camouflage and holding a polystyrene cup, styrofoam cup of coffee wandered up to them. Who's winning? He said chummily. Young Everson of Forward Planning caught me a right zinger on the elbow, you know. We're all going to lose, Crowley said absently. There was a burst of firing from the grounds. Not the snap and zing of pellets, but the full-throated crackle of aerodynamically shaped bits of lead, traveling extremely fast. There was an answering stutter. The redundant warriors stared at one another. A further burst took out a rather ugly Victorian stained glass window beside the door and stitched a row of holes into the plaster by Crowley's head. Aziraphale grabbed his arm. "What the hell is it?" he said. Crowley smiled, like a snake. Nigel Thompson had come to with a mild headache and a vaguely empty space in his recent memory. He was not to know that the human brain, when faced with a sight too terrible to contemplate, is remarkably good at scabbing it over with forced forgetfulness. So he put it down to a pellet strike in the head. He was vaguely aware that his gun was somewhat heavier, but in his mildly bemused state, he did not realize why until some time after he pointed it at a trainee manager, Norman Weathered, from International Audit, and pulled the trigger. "I don't see why you're so shocked," said Crowley. "He wanted a real gun. Every desire in his head was for a real gun." "But you turned him loose on all those unprotected people," said Aziraphale. "Oh no," said Crowley. "Not exactly. Fair's fair." The contingent from financial planning were lying flat on their faces in what had once been the ha-ha, although they weren't very amused. "I always said you couldn't trust those people from purchasing," said the deputy financial manager. "The bastards!" Shot pinged off the wall above him. He crawled hurriedly over to a little group clustered around the fallen Weathered. "How does it look?" he said. The assistant head of wages turned a haggard face toward him. "Pretty bad," he said. "The bullet went through nearly all of them. Access, Barcolard, diners, a lot. It was only the American Express gold that stopped it," said Weathered. They looked in mute horror at the spectacle of a credit card wallet with a bullet hole nearly all the way through. "Why'd they do it?" said the wages officer. The head of Internal Audit opened his mouth to say something reasonable, and didn't. Everyone had a point where they crack, and his had just been hit with a spoon. 20 years on the job. He'd wanted to be a graphic designer. The careers master hadn't heard of that. 20 years of double-checking Form BF-18. 20 years of cranking the bloody hand calculator, when even the people in forward planning had computers. And now, for reasons unknown, but possibly to do with reorganization and a desire to do away with all the expenses of an early retirement, they were shooting at him with bullets. The armies of paranoia marched behind his eyes. He looked down at his own gun. Through the mists of rage and bewilderment, he saw that it was bigger and blacker than it had been when it was issued to him. It felt heavier, too. He aimed it at a bush nearby and watched a stream of bullets blow the bush into oblivion. Oh, so that was their game. Well, someone had to win. He looked at his men. "Okay, guys, let's get the bastards." "The way I see it," said Crowley, "no one has to pull the trigger." He gave Aziraphale a bright and brittle grin. "Come on," he said. "Let's have a look around while everyone's busy." Bullets streaked across the night. Jonathan Parker, purchasing section, was wriggling through the bushes when one of them put an arm around his neck. Nigel Thompson spat a cluster of rhododendron leaves out of his mouth. "Down there, it's company law," he hissed through mud-encrusted features. "But up here, it's me." "That was a pretty low trick," said Aziraphale, as they strolled along an empty corridor. What'd I do?" said Crowley, pushing open the doors at random. "There are people out there shooting one another." "Well, that's just it, isn't it? They're doing it themselves. It's what they really want to do. I just assisted them. Think of it as a microcosm of the universe. Free will for everyone. Inevitable. Right? Aziraphale glared. "Oh, all right," said Crowley wretchedly. "No one's actually going to get killed. They're all going to have miraculous escapes. It wouldn't be any fun otherwise." Aziraphale relaxed. "You know, Crowley," he said, beaming, "I've always said that, deep down inside, you really are quite a..." All right, Crowley snapped. "Tell the whole blessed world, why don't you?" After a while, loose alliances began to emerge. Most of the financial departments found they had interests in common, settled their differences, and ganged up on forward planning. When the first police car arrived, 16 bullets from a variety of directions had hit it in the radiator before it got halfway up the drive. 2 more took out its radio antenna, but they were too late. Too late. Mary Hodges was just putting down the phone when Crowley opened her office door. "It must be terrorists," she snapped. "Or poachers." She peered at the pair of them. You are the police, aren't you?" he said. Crowley saw her eyes begin to widen. Like all demons, he had a good memory for faces. Even after 11 years, the loss of Wimple, and the addition of some rather severe makeup, he snapped his fingers. She settled back into the chair, her face becoming blank, an amiable mask. "There was no need for that," said Aziraphale. "Good." Crowley glanced at his watch. "Morning, ma'am," he said, in a sing-song voice. "We're just a couple of supernatural entities, and we were just wondering if you might help us with the whereabouts of the notorious son of Satan." He smiled coldly at the angel. "I'll wake her up again, shall I? And you can say it." "Well, since you put it like that," said the angel slowly. "Sometimes the old ways are the best," said Crowley. He turned to the impassive woman. "Were you a nun here 11 years ago?" he said. "Yes," said Mary. "There," said Crowley to Aziraphale. "See? I knew I wasn't wrong." "Luck of the devil," muttered the angel. "Your name, then, was Sister Talkative, or something." "Loquacious," said Mary Hodges in a hollow voice. "And do you recall an incident involving the switching of newborn babies?" said Crowley. Mary Hodges hesitated. Hodges hesitated. When she did speak, it was as though memories had been scabbed over were being disturbed for the first time in years. "Yes," she said. "Is there any possibility that the switch could have gone wrong in some way?" "I don't know." Crowley thought for a bit. "You must have had records," he said. "There are always records. Everyone has records these days." He glanced proudly at Aziraphale. "It was one of my better ideas." "Oh, yes," said Mary Hodges. "And where are they?" said Aziraphale sweetly. "There was a fire just after the birth." Crowley groaned and threw his hands up in the air. "That was Hastur, probably. It's his style. And you believe those guys? I bet he thought he was being really clever." "Do you recall any details about the other child?" said Aziraphale. "Yes." "Please tell me." "He had lovely little toesy wosies." "Oh." "And he was very sweet," said Mary Hodges wistfully. There was the sound of a siren outside, abruptly broken off as bullets hit it. Aziraphale nudged Crowley. "Get a move on," he said. "We're going to be knee-deep in police at any moment, and I will of course be morally obliged to help them in their inquiries." He thought for a moment. Perhaps she can remember if there were any other women giving birth that night, and there was a sound of running feet downstairs. "Stop them," said Crowley. "We need more time. We need more miracles, and we'll really start getting noticed by up there," said Aziraphale. "If you really want Gabriel, or someone wondering why 40 policemen have gone to sleep..." "Okay," said Crowley. That's it. It was worth a try. Let's get out of here." In 30 seconds you will wake up, said Aziraphale to the entranced ex-nun, and you will have had a lovely dream about whatever you like best, and... Yes, fine, said Crowley. Can we go now? No one noticed them leaving. The police were too busy herding in 40 adrenaline-drunk, fighting-mad management trainees. 3 police vans had gouged tracks in the lawn, and Aziraphale made Crowley back up for the first of the ambulances. But then the Bentley whisked into the night. Behind them, the summer house and gazebo were already ablaze. We've really left that poor woman behind in a dreadful situation, said the angel. You think? Said Crowley, trying to hit a hedgehog and missing. Bookings will double, you mark my words. If she plays her cards right, sorts out the waivers, ties up all the legal bits, initiative training with real guns, they'll form queues. Why are you always so cynical? I said, because it's my job. They drove in silence for a while. Then Aziraphale said, You'd think he'd show up, wouldn't you? You'd think we could detect him in some way. He won't show up. Not to us. Protective camouflage. He won't even know it, but his powers will keep him hidden from prying occult forces. Occult forces? You and me, explained Crowley. I'm not a cult, said Aziraphale. Angels aren't a cult. We're ethereal. Whatever, snapped Crowley, too worried to argue. Is there some other way of locating him? Crowley shrugged. Search me. How much experience do you think I've got in these matters? Armageddon only happens once, you know. They don't let you go around again until you get it right. Angel stared out at the rushing hedgerows. It all seems so peaceful, he said. How do you think it will happen? Well, thermonuclear extinction has always been very popular, although I must say the big boys are being quite polite to each other at the moment. Asteroid strike, said Aziraphale. Quite the fashion these days, I understand. Strike into the Indian Ocean, great big cloud of dust and vapor, goodbye all higher life forms. Wow, said Crowley, taking care to exceed the speed limit. Every little bit helped. Doesn't bear thinking about it, does it? Said Aziraphale gloomily. All the higher life forms scythe away just like that. Terrible. Nothing but dust and fundamentalists. That was nasty. Sorry, wouldn't resist. They stared at the road. Maybe some terrorists, Aziraphale began. Not one of ours, said Crowley. Or ours, said Aziraphale. Although ours are freedom fighters, of course. I'll tell you what, said Crowley, scorching rubber on the Tadfield bypass. Cards on the table time. I'll tell you ours if you tell me yours. All right, you first. Oh no, you first. But you're a demon. Yes, but a demon of my word, I should hope. Aziraphale named 5 political leaders. Crowley named 6. 3 names appeared on both lists. See, said Crowley. It's just like I've always said. They're cunning buggers, humans. You can't trust them an inch. But I don't think any of ours have any big plans afoot, said Aziraphale. Just minor acts of terror, political protest, he corrected. Ah, said Crowley bitterly. You mean none of this cheap, mass-produced murder, just personal service, every bullet individually fired by skilled craftsmen? Aziraphale didn't rise to it. What are you going to do now? Try and get some sleep. You don't need sleep. I don't need sleep. Evil never sleeps, and virtue is ever vigilant. Evil in general, maybe. This specific part of it has got into the habit of getting its head down occasionally. He stared into the headlights. The time would come soon enough when sleep would be right out of the question. When those below found out that he personally lost the Antichrist, they'd probably dig out all of those reports he'd done on the Spanish Inquisition and try them out on him, one at a time, then all together. He rummaged into the glove compartment, fumbled a tape at random, and slotted it into the player. A little music would. Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me, for me, for me, muttered Crowley. His expression went blank for a moment. Then he gave a strangled scream and wrenched at the on-off knob. Of course, we might be able to get a human to find him, said Aziraphale thoughtfully. What? Said Crowley distractedly. Humans are good at finding other humans. They've been doing it for thousands of years, and the child is human, as well as, he would be hidden from us. Other humans might be able to, sense him perhaps, or spot things we wouldn't think of. It wouldn't work. He's the Antichrist. He's got this sort of automatic defense, hasn't he? Even if he doesn't know it. It won't even let people suspect him. Not yet. Not till it's all ready. Suspicion will slide off him like whatever it is water slides off of, he finished lamely. Got any better ideas? Got one single better idea, said Aziraphale. No. Right then. It could work. Don't tell me you haven't got any front organizations you could use. I know I have. We could see if we can pick up the trail. What could they do that we couldn't do? Well, for start, they wouldn't get people to shoot one another. They wouldn't hypnotize respectable women. Okay. But it hasn't got a snowball's chance in hell. Believe me, I know. But I can't think of anything better. Crowley turned onto the motorway and headed for London. I have a certain network of agents, said Aziraphale, after a while, spread across the country, a disciplined force. I could set them searching. I have something similar, Crowley admitted. You know how it is. You never know when they might come in handy. We'd better alert them. Do you think they ought to work together? Crowley shook his head. I don't think that would be a good idea, he said. They're not very sophisticated, politically speaking. Then we'll each contact our own people and see what they can manage. Got to be worth a try, I suppose, said Crowley. It's not as if I haven't got lots of other work to do, God knows. His forehead creased for a moment. Then he slapped the steering wheel triumphantly. Ducks! He shouted. What? That's what water slides off of. Aziraphale took a deep breath.
I like that that's the highlight of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Aziraphale took a deep breath. Just drive the car, please, he said wearily. They drove back through the dawn, while the cassette player played J.S. Bach's Mass in B minor, vocals by F. Mercury. Crowley liked the city in the early morning. Its population consisted almost entirely of people who had proper jobs to do, and real reasons for being there, as opposed to the unnecessary millions who trailed in after 8 a.m., and the streets were more or less quiet. There were double yellow, no parking lines in the narrow road outside Aziraphale's bookshop, but they obediently rolled back on themselves when the Bentley pulled onto the curb. Well, okay, he said to as Aziraphale got his coat from the back seat. We'll keep in touch, okay? What's this? Said Aziraphale, holding up a brown oblong. Crowley squinted at it. A book, he said. not mine. Aziraphale turned a few of the yellow pages. Tiny bibliophilic bells rang in the back of his mind. Must have belonged to the young lady, he said slowly. We ought to have got her address. Look, I'm in enough trouble as it is. I don't want it to get out about that I go and return people's property to them, said Crowley. Aziraphale reached the title page. It was probably a good job Crowley couldn't see his expression. I suppose you could always send it to the post office there. If you really must. Address it to the mad woman with the bicycle. Never trust a woman who gives funny names to means of transport. Yes, certainly, said the angel. He fumbled for his keys, dropped them on the pavement, picked them up, dropped them again, and hurried to the shop. We'll be in touch then, shall we? Crowley called after him. Aziraphale paused in an act of turning the key. What? He said. Oh, yes, fine, jolly good. And he slammed the door. Right, mumbled Crowley, suddenly feeling very alone. Torchlight flicked in the lanes. The trouble with trying to find a brown-covered book among brown leaves and brown water at the bottom of a ditch of brown earth in the brown, grayish light of dawn was that you couldn't. It wasn't there. Anathema tried every method of search she could think of. There was the methodical quartering in the ground. There was the slapdash poking at the bracken by the roadside. There was the nonchalant sidling up to it and looking out of the side of her eye. She even tried the one which every romantic nerve in her body insisted should work, which consisted of theatrically giving up, sitting down, and letting her glance fall naturally on a patch of earth which, if she had been in any decent narrative, should have contained the book. She's not in a decent narrative. She's in this narrative. It didn't. Which meant, as she had feared all along, that it was probably in the back of a car belonging to two consenting cycle repairmen. Yeah. She could feel generations of Agnes Nutter's descendants laughing at her. Even if those two were honest enough to want to return it, they'd hardly go to all the trouble of finding a cottage they'd barely seen in the dark. The only hope was that they wouldn't know what it was they've got. Aziraphale, like many Soho merchants who specialized in hard-to-find books for the discerning connoisseur, had a back room, but what was in there was far more esoteric than anything normally found inside a shrink-wrapped bag for the customer who knows what he wants. He was particularly proud of his books of prophecy, first editions usually, and every one was signed. He'd got Robert Nixon, a 16th century half-wit not related to any U.S. president, and Martha the Gypsy, and Ignatius Silbla, and old Otwell Binns, Nostradamus had signed, to mine old friend Aziraphale, with best wishes. Mother Shipton had spilled drink on his copy, and in a climate-controlled cabinet in one corner was the original scroll in the shaky handwriting of St. John the Divine of Patmos, whose revelation had been the all-time bestseller. Aziraphale had found him a nice chap, if a bit too fond of odd mushrooms. What the collection did not have was a copy of the nice and accurate prophecies of Agnes Nutter, and Aziraphale walked into the room holding it as a keen philatelist might hold a Maratus blue. Oh, flautist. Yes.
These words.
Mm-hmm.
Just wait till I get to wind up, girl.
Philatellist might hold a Maritus Blue. I'm assuming it's a musician holding a really expensive musical instrument. Holding a Maritus Blue that had turned up on a postcard from his aunt. He'd never seen a copy before, but he'd heard about it. Everyone in the trade, which considering it was a highly specialized trade, meant about a dozen people, had heard of it. Its existence was a sort of vacuum around which all sorts of strange stories had been orbiting for hundreds of years. Aziraphale realized he wasn't sure if he could orbit a vacuum. Or if you could orbit a vacuum. And didn't care. The nice and accurate prophecies made the Hitler diaries look like, well, a bunch of forgeries. His hands hardly shook at all as he laid it down on a bench, pulled on a pair of surgical gloves, and opened it reverentially. Aziraphale was an angel, but he also worshipped books. The title page said, "The Knife and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter," in slightly smaller type. Being a certain and precise history, it's written really badly, so I'm trying to enunciate the bad spelling. So bear with me here, because it's written in like uneducated Old English. Being a 13 and precise history from the present day unto the ending of this world, in slightly smaller type, containing therein many diverse wonders and precepts for the wife, in a different type, more complete than ever yet before, prolific. In smaller type, but in capitals, concerning the strange times ahead, in slightly desperate italicized, and events of a wonderful nature, in larger type once more, reminiscent of Nostradamus at Hifbeft, Ursula Simpson. The prophecies were numbered, and there were more than 4,000 of them. Steady, steady, Aziraphale muttered to himself. He went into the little kitchenette and made himself some cocoa and took some deep breaths. Then he came back and read a prophecy at random. 40 minutes later, the cocoa was still untouched. A 1,000 elephants. I'm just drinking.
Some of these characters, like, I wonder, like, whether they show up again or not, because it seems like every one of them has a backstory, even the ones that are just mentioned once.
A great thing about Neil Gaiman is everybody who's written in his books always have a purpose. Thank you, Bonnie.
Go stop.
Sounds like you're home. Yeah, give me just a second.
Not a problem. So, we've been going for, let's see, hour and a half. Maybe, but I don't know. It's always been like it's just interesting to see that every character gets like their own full page of backstory. as they're introduced. Like, do the guys from, like, do we ever hear about the guys from accounting again, ever? Maybe. I don't know. And a lot of ephemeral words as well. Which makes me a bit concerned about reading Wind Up Girl out loud when it comes to... I forgot the company name. I just remembered the people. Now, did he live at the library? Or did he work at the library? Did he have like a little attic he rented? I actually volunteered at a library a little while ago. But part of that's because I just like the feel of books. Although the best part has always been whenever I get a new book, first thing I always do is just flip through the pages and smell it. I just like that smell. That's fair. I haven't been to one like so much in a while now. I know, it's great, isn't it? I've got a lot of the books I still have are have like, well, not all of them. Some of them still got like stains and crumpled pages just from being used. But after I would trade my books as well with my my siblings too, so we'd switch them out and they'd change hands and be read again.
What are we talking about?
Books and how they smell.
Books.
I was saying the first thing I do when I get a new book, first thing I do is flip through the pages and just
Bask in its funk.
I love the way new books smell. It is just one of those things I...
New books tend to smell good.
Anywho, how are the ghost dogs?
They were just barking. Oh. They're just holding me.
I don't think there's gonna be many actual bookstores anymore because everything's digital. Libraries are gonna be all computers.
Barnes and Noble is still holding up pretty strong.
They're holding up. But I mean, part of that's because they also got a little cafe too. I think
Usually a Starbucks.
it is usually a start. I do like Barnes and Nobles now.
Anywho, I think we should jump back in.
Yeah.
The red-haired woman in the center of the hotel bar was the most successful war correspondent in the world. She now had a passport in the name of Carmine Zoidberg. I almost said Zoidberg. You know what? It's Zoidberg now. Carmine Zoidberg. Yes, Carmine Zoidberg. Whoop, 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 whoop. And she went where the wars were. Well, more or less. Actually, she went where the wars weren't. She'd already been where the wars were. She was not well known, except where it counted. Get half a dozen war correspondents together in an airport bar, and the conversations will, like a compass orienting to the north, swing around to the Murchison of the New York Times, to Van Horn of Newsweek, to Anforth of ITN News. War correspondents. But when Murchison and Van Horn and Anforth ran into each other in a burnt-out tin shack in Beirut or Afghanistan or the Sudan, they admired each other's scars and have downed a few drinks. They would exchange odd anecdotes of Red Zoidberg. Zoidberg. Well, it's Zuigibr. Zoidberg. From the National World Weekly. That dumb rag, Murchison would say. It doesn't goddamn know what it's goddamn got. Actually, the National World Weekly did know just what it had got. It had a war correspondent. It just didn't know why or what to do with one now that it had her. A typical National World Weekly would tell the world how Jesus' face was seen in a Big Mac bun bought by someone from Des Moines, with an artist's impression of the bun, how Elvis Presley was recently sighted working in a Burger Lord in Des Moines, how listening to Elvis's records cured a Des Moines housewife's cancer, how the spat of werewolves infesting the Midwest are the offspring of noble pioneer women raped by Bigfoot, and that Elvis was taken by space aliens in 1976 because he was too good for this world. There's an asterisk here. Remarkably, one of these stories is indeed true. You decide. That was the National World Weekly. They sold 4 million copies a week, and they needed a war correspondent like they needed an exclusive interview with the General Secretary of the United States. The interview was done in 1983 and went as follows. Question. You're the Secretary of the United Nations, then? Oh, United Nations, not United States. You're the Secretary of the United Nations, then? Answer. C. Question. Ever sighted Elvis? Yep. So they paid Red Zoidberg a great deal of money to go and find wars. It ignored the bulging, badly typed envelopes she sent them occasionally from around the globe to justify her generally fairly reasonable expense claims. They felt justified in this because, as they saw it, He really wasn't a very good war correspondent, although she was undoubtedly the most attractive, which counted for a lot in the National World Weekly. Her war reports were always about a bunch of guys shooting at each other with no real understanding of the wider political ramifications, and, more importantly, no human interest. Occasionally, they would hand one of her stories over to a rewrite man to fix up. Jesus appeared to 9-year-old Manuel Gonzalez during a pitched battle on the Rio Concorsa and told him to go home because his mother worried about him. "I knew it was Jesus," said the brave little child, "because he looked like he did when his picture miraculously appeared on my sandwich box." That's a direct quote. Mostly, the National World Weekly left her alone and carefully filed her stories in the rubbish bin. Murchison and Van Horn and Anforth didn't care about this. All they knew was that whenever a war broke out, Miss Zoidberg was there first, practically before. "How does she do it?" they would ask each other incredulously. "How the hell does she do it?" And their eyes would meet, and silently say, if she was a car, she'd be made by Ferrari. She's the kind of woman you'd expect to see as a beautiful consort to the corrupt generalissimo of a collapsing third world country. And she hangs around with guys like us. We're the lucky guys, right? Miss Zoidberg just smiled and bought another round of drinks for everybody on the National World Weekly, and watched the fights break out around her, and she smiled. She had been right. Journalism suited her. Yeah, red Ferrari for sure. She had been right. Journalism suited her. Even so, everyone needs a holiday, and Red Zoidberg was on her first in 11 years. She was on a small Mediterranean island which made its money from the tourist trade, and that in itself was odd. Red looked to be the kind of woman who, if she took a holiday on any island smaller than Australia, would be doing so because she was friends with the man who owned it. And had you told any islander a month before that war was coming, he would have laughed at you and tried to sell you a raffia work wine holder or a picture of the bay done in seashells. That was then. This was now. Now, a deep religio-political divide concerning which 4 small mainland countries they weren't actually a part of had split the country into 3 factions, destroyed the statue of Santa Maria in the town square, and done for the tourist trade. Red sat at the bar of the Hotel de Palomar de Sol, drinking what passed for a cocktail. In one corner, a tired pianist played, and a waiter in a toupee groaned into the microphone. Once upon a time there was a little white bull, very sad because he was a little white bull. The man threw himself through the window, a knife between his teeth, a Kalashnikov automatic rifle in one hand, a grenade in the other. I gleamed Is Oteg id der Gain Ogder. He paused. He took the knife out of his mouth and began again. I claim this hotel in the name of the pro-Turkish Liberation faction. The last 2 holiday makers remaining on the island, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Thirlfall of 9 The Elms, Pynton. They always maintained that one of the nice things about going on holiday was not having to read the newspapers or listen to the news, just getting away from it all, really. and due to a tummy bug contracted by Mr. Threfall and Mrs. Threfall, rather overdoing it in the sun their first day. This was their first time out of the hotel room for a week and a half. The last two holidaymakers remaining on the island climbed underneath their table. Red unconcernedly withdrew the maraschino cherry from her drink and put it to her scarlet lips. Sucked it slowly off the stick in a way that made several men in the room break into a cold sweat. The pianist stood up, reached into his piano, and pulled out a vintage submachine gun. This hotel has already been claimed by the pro-Greek territorial brigade, he screamed. Make one false move, and I shoot out your living daylight. I shoot out your living daylight. That is what is typed there. There was a motion at the door. A huge, black-bearded individual with a golden smile and a genuine antique Gatling gun stood there, with a cohort of equally huge, although less impressively armed men behind him. A strategic important hotel for years a symbol of the fascist imperialist Turco-Greek running dog tourist trade is now the property of the Italo-Maltese freedom fighters, he boomed affably. Now we kill everybody. Rubbish, said the pianist. It is not strategically important. It just has extremely well-stocked wine cellar. He's right, Pedro, said the man with the Kalashnikov. That's why I lot wanted. Il General Ernesto de Montoya said to me, he said, Fernando, this war will be over by Saturday, and the lads will be wanting a good time. Up down to the Hotel de Palomar del Sol and claim its booty, will you? The bearded man turned red. He's bloody important strategically. Fernando Cianti. I drew a big map of the island and is right in the middle, which makes it pretty bloody strategically important, I can tell you. Ah, said Fernando. You might as well say that just because little Diego's house has a view of the decent capitalist topless private beach, that it is strategically important. The pianist blushed a deep red. Our lot got that this morning, he admitted. There was silence. In the silence was a faint, silken rasping. Red uncrossed her legs. The pianist's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. Well, it's pretty strategically important, he managed, trying to ignore the woman on the bar stool. I mean, if someone landed a submarine on it, you'd want to be somewhere you could see it all. Silence.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot more strategically important than this hotel anyways, he finished. Pedro coughed ominously. The next person who says anything at all, is dead, he grinned, and hefted his gun. Right. Now everyone against far wall. Nobody moved. They weren't listening to him anymore. They were listening to a low, indistinct murmuring from the hallway behind him. Quiet and monotonous. There was some shuffling among the cohort in the doorway. They seemed to be doing their best to stand firm, but they were being inexorably edged out of the way by the muttering, which had begun to resolve itself into audible phrases. Don't mind me, gents. What a night, eh? 3 times round the island. Nearly didn't find the place. Someone doesn't believe in signposts, eh? Still, find it in the end. Had to stop and ask 4 times. Finally asked the post office. They always know at the post office. Had to draw me a map, though. Got it here somewhere. Sliding serenely past the men with guns, like a pike through a trout pond, came a small, bespectacled man in a blue uniform, carrying a long, thin brown paper-wrapped parcel tied with string. His sole concession to the climate were his open-toed, plastic brown sandals, although the green woolen socks he wore underneath them showed his deep and natural distrust of foreign weather. He had a peaked cap on his head, with International Express written on it in large white letters. He was unarmed, but no one touched him. No one ever pointed a gun at him. It just stared. The little man looked around the room, scanning the faces, and then looking back down at his clipboard. Then he walked straight over to Red, still sitting on her bar stool. "Package for you, miss," he said. Red took it and began to untie the string. The International Express man coughed discreetly and presented the journalist with a well-thumbed receipt pad and a yellow plastic ballpoint pen attached to the clipboard by a piece of string. "You have to sign for it, miss. Just there. Print your full name over here. Signature down there." "Of course." Red signed the receipt pad illegibly, then printed her name. The name she wrote was not Carmine Zoidberg. It was a much shorter name. The man thanked her kindly and made his way out, muttering, "Lovely place you've got here, gents. Always meant to come here on holiday. Sorry to trouble you. Excuse me, sir." And he passed out of their lives as serenely as he had come. Red finished opening the parcel. April began to edge around to get a better look. Inside the package was a large sword. She examined it. It was a very straightforward sword, long and sharp. It looked both old and unused, and it had nothing ornamental or impressive about it. This was no magical sword, no mystic weapon of power and might. It was very obviously a sword created to slice, chop, cut, preferably kill, but failing that, irreparably maim. A very large number of people indeed. Had an... Yes?
So, this little hand-sized parcel had a sword in it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just making sure.
I mean, you could carry a sword in hand.
It's just a pocket of holding.
No, it's just a package. It's just a wrapped package. Swords are surprisingly not that heavy.
I have several.
Mm-hmm. So you'd know. Red clasped the hilt in her exquisitely manicured right hand and held it up to eye level. The blade glinted. "All right," she said, stepping down from the stool. "Fine." She finished the drink, after the sword over one shoulder, and looked around at the puzzled factions, who now encircled her completely. "Sorry to run out on you chaps," she would say. "Would love to stay and get to know you better." The men in the room suddenly realized that they didn't want to know her better. She was beautiful, but she was beautiful in the way a forest fire was beautiful. Something to be admired from a distance, not up close. And she held her sword, and she smiled like a knife. There were a number of guns in that room, and slowly, trembling, they were focused on her chest, and her back, and head. They encircled her completely. "Don't move," croaked Pedro. Everyone else nodded. Red shrugged. She began to walk forward. Every finger on every trigger tightened, almost of its own accord. Lead and the smell of cordite filled the air. Red's cocktail glass smashed in her hand. The room's remaining mirrors exploded in lethal shards. Part of the ceiling fell down, and then it was over. Carmine Zoidberg turned and stared at the bodies surrounding her, as if she hadn't the faintest idea how they came to be there. She licked a splatter of blood, someone else's blood, on the back of her hand, the scarlet cat-like tongue. Then she smiled. And she walked out of the bar, her heels clicking on the tiles, like the tapping of distant hammers. The two holiday makers climbed out from under the table and surveyed the carnage. This wouldn't have happened if we had gotten to Torre Mulidonis like we usually do, said one of them plaintively. Foreigners, said the other. It's just not like us, Patricia. That settles it, then. Next year, we go to Brighton, said Mrs. Therafel, completely missing the significance of what had just happened. It meant there wouldn't be any next year. Rather lowered the odds of there being any next week to speak of. Ooh, we are not getting very far today.
That's fine.
No, it is. Yeah, we're not making a huge dent. Say by comparison, we are going very slow. That's fine. It really ramps up towards the end. So.
About how far?
A little over a third.
That's not bad.
Yeah, we were only... Ah, shit, I just lost my page. We were about a fourth of the way last time.
No, just wait. I'll have all the big words on the next. What's that?
I'm trying to see where it actually... About 4 pages. Yeah, 402. We are at 130. It's just under halfway.
Yeah, that's not bad.
So the next chapter, Thursday. There was a newcomer in the village. New people were always a source of interest and speculation among the them. Them has an asterisk. It didn't matter what the four had called their gang over the years, the frequent name changes usually being prompted by whatever Adam had happened to have read or viewed the previous day. The Adam Young Squad, Adam and Co., the Hole in the Chalk Gang, the really well-known four, the Legion of Really Superheroes, the Quarry Gang, the Secret Four, the Justice Society of Tadfield, the Galaxatrons, the Four Just Persons, the Rebels. Everyone else just referred to them darkly as them, and eventually they did too. But this time, Pepper had impressive news. She's moved into Jasmine's cottage. She's a witch, she said. I know, because Mrs. Henderson does the cleaning, and she told my mother she gets a witch's newspaper. She gets loads of ordinary newspapers, too, but she gets this special witch's one. My father says there's no such thing as witches, said Wensleydale, who had fair, wavy hair, and peered seriously out at life through thick, black-rimmed spectacles. But it was widely believed that he had once been christened Jeremy. But no one had ever used the name, not even his parents, who called him Youngster. They did this in the subconscious hope that he might take the hint. Wensleydale gave the impression of having been born at the mental age of 47. Don't see why not, said Brian, who had a wide, cheerful face under an apparently permanent layer of grime. I don't see why witches shouldn't have their own newspaper, with stories about all the latest spells in that. My father gets Angler's mail. I bet there's more witches than anglers. It's called Psychic News, volunteered Pepper. It's not witches, said Wensleydale. My aunt has that. That's just spoon-bending and fortune-telling and people thinking they were Queen Elizabeth I in another life. There's no witches anymore, actually. People invented medicines and that and told them they didn't need any more and started burning them. It could have pictures of frogs and things, said Brian, who was reluctant to let a good idea go to waste, and then road chests of broomsticks and a cat's column. Anyway, your aunt could be a witch, said Pepper. In secret. It could be your aunt all day and go witching at night. Not my aunt, said Wensleydale darkly. And recipes, said Brian. New uses for leftover toad. Oh, shut up, said Pepper. Brian snorted. It had been Wensleydale who had said that. There'd have been a half-hearted scuffle, as between friends. But the other them had long ago learned that Pepper did not consider herself bound by the informal conventions of brotherly scuffles. She could kick and bite with astonishing physiological accuracy for a girl of 11. Besides, at 11 years old, the them were beginning to be bothered by the dim conception that laying hands on good old Pep moved things into blood-thumping categories they weren't entirely at home with yet, besides earning you a snake-fast blow that would have floored the Karate Kid. But she was good to have in your gang. They remembered with pride the time when Greasy Johnson and his gang had taunted them for playing with a girl. Pepper had erupted with a fury that had caused Greasy's mother to come round that evening and complain. Greasy Johnson was a sad and oversized child. There's one at every school, not exactly fat, but simply huge and wearing almost the same size clothes as his father. Paper tore under his tremendous fingers, pen shattered in his grip. Children whom he tried to play with in quiet, friendly games ended up getting under his huge feet, and Greasy Johnson had become a bully almost in self-defense. After all, it was better to be called a bully, which at least implied some sort of control and desire, than to be called a big clumsy oaf. He was the despair of the sportsmaster. Because if Greasy Johnson had taken the slightest interest in sport, then the school could have been champions. But Greasy Johnson had never found a sport that suited him. He was instead secretly devoted to his collection of tropical fish, which won him prizes. Greasy Johnson was the same age as Adam Young, two within a few hours, and his parents had never told him he was adopted. See, you were right about the babies. It's as if Neil Gaiman knew, hun.
No, well,
You asked earlier if there was a third baby.
if there was a what?
Third baby.
Oh, yeah.
This was just a side note written, hun. It said you were right about the babies.
Oh, I got it.
Pepper looked upon him, a giant male, as a natural enemy. She herself had short red hair, and a face which was not so much freckled as one big freckle with occasional areas of skin. Pepper's given first name were Pippin Galadriel Moonchild. She had been given them in a naming ceremony in a muddy valley field that contained 3 sick sheep and a number of leaky polythene teepees. Her mother had chosen the Welsh valley of Pant-y-Iordl, Welsh names, as the ideal site to return to nature. 6 months later, sick of the rain, the mosquitoes, the men, the tent-trampling sheep who ate first the whole commune's marijuana crop, and then its antique minibus, and page turn. by now beginning to glimpse why almost the entire drive of human history has been an attempt to get as far away from nature as possible, Pepper's mother returned to Pepper's surprised grandparents in Tadfield, bought a bra, and enrolled in a sociology course with a deep sigh of relief. There are only two ways a child can go with a name like Pippin, Galadriel, Moonchild, and Pepper had chosen the other one. The three male them had learned this on their first day of school in the playground at the age of 4. They had asked her name, and all innocent, she had told them. Subsequently, a bucket of water had been needed to separate Pippin Galadriel Moonchild's teeth from Adam's shoe. Wensleydale's first pair of spectacles had been broken, and Brian's sweater needed 5 stitches. The them were together from then on, and Pepper was Pepper forever, except to her mother, and when they were feeling especially courageous, and the them were almost out of earshot, Greasy Johnson and the Johnsonites, the village's only other gang. Adam drummed his heel on the edge of the milk crate. I was doing the office... excuse me, let me try that again. Adam drummed his heel on the edge of the milk crate that was doing the office of a sea. What? Listening to this bickering with the relaxed air of a king listening to the idle chatter of his courtiers, he chewed lazily on a straw. It was a Thursday morning, the holidays stretched ahead, endless and unsullied. They needed filling up. He let the conversation float around him like the buzzing of grasshoppers, or, more precisely, like a prospector watching the churning gravel for a glint of useful gold. In our Sunday paper, it said there was thousands of witches in the country, said Brian, worshipping nature and eating health food and that. I don't see why we shouldn't have one round here. They were flooding the country with a wave of mindless evil, it said. What? Worshipping nature and eating health food, said Wensleydale. That's what it said. But them gave this due consideration, and they had once, at Adam's instigation, tried a health food diet for a whole afternoon. Their verdict was that you could live very well on healthy food provided you had a big cooked stomach beforehand. Oh, big cooked lunch, beforehand. Brian leaned forward conspiratorially. And it said they dance around with no clothes on, he added. They go up on the hills in Stonehenge and stuff and dance with no clothes on. This time the consideration was more thoughtful. The them had reached the position where, as it were, the roller coaster of life had almost completed the long haul to the top of the first big humpback of puberty, so they could just look down into its precipitous ride ahead, full of mystery, terror, and exciting curves. Huh, said Pepper. Not my aunt, said Wensleydale, breaking the spell. Definitely not my aunt. She's just trying to talk to my uncle. Your uncle's dead, said Pepper. She says he still moves a glass about, said Wensleydale defensively. My father says it was moving glasses about the whole time that made him dead in the first place. Don't know why she wants to talk to him, he added. They never talked much when he was alive. That's necromancy, that is, said Brian. It's in the Bible. We ought to stop it. God's dead against necromancy and witches, and you can go to hell for it. There was a lazy shifting of position on the milk crate throne. Adam was going to speak. The them fell silent. Adam was always worth listening to. Deep in their hearts, the them knew that they weren't a gang of 4. They were a gang of 3, which belonged to Adam. But if you wanted excitement and interest in crowded days, then every them would prize a lowly position in Adam's gang above leadership in any other gang anywhere. I don't see why everyone's so down on witches, said Adam. The them glanced at one another. This sounded promising. Well, they blight crops, said Pepper, and sink ships, and kill you if you're going to be king and stuff, and brew up stuff with herbs. My mother uses herbs, said Adam, and so does yours. Oh, those are all right, said Brian, determined to not lose his position as a cult expert. I expect God said it was all right to use mint and sage and so on. Stands to reason there's nothing wrong with mint and sage. And they can make you be ill just by looking at you, said Pepper. It's called the evil eye. They give you a look, and then you get ill and no one knows why. And they make a model of you and stick it full of pins, and you get ill where all the pins are, she said cheerfully. That sort of thing doesn't happen anymore, reiterated Wensleydale, a rational thinking person. Those were invented science, and all the vicars were set fire. And all the vicars set fire to the witches for their own good. It was called the Spanish Inquisition.
Wow.
Then I reckon we should find out if her at Jasmine Cottage is a witch, and if she is, we should tell Mr. Pickersgill, said Brian. Mr. Pickersgill was the vicar. Currently, he was in dispute with them over subjects ranging from climbing the yew tree in the churchyard to ringing the bell and running away. I don't reckon it's allowed going around setting fire to people, said Adam. Otherwise, people'd be doing it all the time. It's all right if you're religious, said Brian reassuringly. And it stops the witches from going to hell, so I expect they'd be quite grateful if they understood it properly. Can't see Picky setting fire to anyone, said Pepper. Oh, I don't know, said Brian meaningfully. Not actually setting them on actual fire, sniffed Pepper. He's more likely to tell their parents and leave it up to them if anyone's going to be set on fire or not. The them shook their heads in disgust at the current low standards of ecclesiastical responsibility. And then the other three looked expectantly at Adam. They always looked expectantly at Adam. He was the one that had the ideas. Perhaps we ought to do it ourselves, he said. Someone ought to be doing something if there's all these witches about. It's like that neighborhood watch scheme. Neighborhood witch, said Pepper. No, Adam said coldly. And we can't be the Spanish Inquisition, said Wensleydale. We're not Spanish. I bet you don't have to be Spanish to be the Spanish Inquisition, said Adam. I bet it's like Scottish eggs or American hamburgers. It just has to look Spanish. We've got to make it look Spanish, then everyone would know it's the Spanish Inquisition. There was silence. It was broken by the crackling of one of the empty crisp packets that had accumulated over wherever Brian was sitting. They looked at him. I've got a bullfight poster with my name on it, said Brian slowly. Okay. Lunchtime came and went. The new Spanish Inquisition reconvened. The head inquisitor inspected it critically. What are those? He demanded. You click them together when you dance, said Wensleydale, a shade defensively. My aunt bought them back from Spain years ago. They're called maracas, I think. They've got a picture of a Spanish dancer on them, look. What's she dancing with a bull for? Said Adam. That's to show it's Spanish, says Wensleydale. Adam let it pass. The bullfight poster was everything Brian had promised. Pepper had something rather like a gravy boat made out of raffia. It's for putting wine in, she said defiantly. My mother brought it back from Spain. It hasn't got a bull on it, Adam said severely. Doesn't have to, Pepper countered, moving just ever so slightly into a fighting stance. Adam hesitated. His sister Sarah and her boyfriend had also been to Spain. Sarah had returned with a very large purple toy donkey which, while definitely Spanish, did not come up to what Adam instinctively felt should be the tone for the Spanish Inquisition. The boyfriend, on the other hand, had brought back a very ornate sword which, despite its tendency to bend when picked up and go blunt when asked to cut paper, proclaimed itself to be made of Toledo steel. Adam had spent an instructive half hour with the encyclopedia and felt that this was just what the Inquisition needed. Subtle hints had not worked, however. In the end, Adam had taken a bunch of onions from the kitchen. They might well have been Spanish, but even Adam had to concede that, as decor for the Spanish Inquisitorial premises, they lacked that certain something. He was in no position to argue too vehemently about raffia wine holders. Very good, he said. You're certain they're Spanish onions, said Pepper, relaxing. Of course, said Adam. Spanish onions. Everyone knows that. It could be French, said Pepper doggedly. France is famous for onions. It doesn't matter, said Adam, who was getting fed up with onions. France is nearly Spanish, and I don't expect witches to know the difference. What with spending all their time flying around at night, it all looks like the Contenong. Witches. Contenong's a word.
Do they say that?
Hmm?
Do the kids say that?
That's what it's written. It all looks like the Contenog. Contenong.
They've got a weird
Vocabulary.
askew level of
Yes.
learning.
Yep.
They know these words, but are
Yeah. Dumb as a sack of bricks at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Anyway, if you don't like it, you can jolly well go and start your own Inquisition anyway. For once, Pepper didn't push it. She'd been promised the post of head torturer. No one doubted who was going to be Chief Inquisitor. Wensleydale and Brian were less enthralled with their roles as inquisitorial guards. Well, you don't know any Spanish, said Adam, whose lunch hour had included 10 minutes with a phrase book Sarah had bought in a haze of romanticism in Alicante. That doesn't matter, because actually you have to talk in Latin, said Wensleydale, who had also been doing some slightly more accurate lunchtime reading. And Spanish, said Adam firmly. That's why it's the Spanish Inquisition. I don't see why it shouldn't be a British Inquisition, said Brian. I don't see why we should have fought the Armada and everything just to have their smelly Inquisition. That's fair. This had been slightly bothering Adam's patriotic sensibilities as well. I reckon, he said, that we should sort of start Spanish, then make it the British Inquisition when we've got the hang of it. And now, he added, the Inquisitorial Guard will go and fetch the first witch. Poor favor. The new inhabitant of Jasmine College would have to wait, they've decided. What they needed to do was start small and work their way up. The Spanish Inquisition, poor favor.
Poor favor.
Art thou a witch, Ole? Said the Chief Inquisitor. Yes, said Pepper's little sister, who was 6 and built like a small golden-haired football. You mustn't say yes. You've got to say no, hissed the head torturer, nudging the suspect. And then what? Demanded the suspect. And then we torture you to make you say yes, said the head torturer. I told you. It's good fun. The torturing doesn't hurt. Hasta la visa, he added quickly. The little suspect gave the decor of the Inquisitorial headquarters a disparaging look, and there was a decided odor of onion. Huh, she said. I want to be a witch. With a warty nose and green skin and a lovely cat, I'd call it Blackie and lots of potions and... The head torturer nodded to the Chief Inquisitor. Look, said Pepper desperately, no one's saying you can't be a witch. You just have to say that you're not a witch. No point in us taking all this trouble, she added severely, if you're going to go around saying yes the minute we ask you. The suspect considered this. But I wants to be a witch, she wailed. The male of them exchanged exhausted glances. This was out of their league. If you say no, said Pepper, you can have my snidey stable set. I've never used it, she added, glaring at the other. At the other them, and daring them to make a comment. You have used it, snapped her sister. I've seen it. It's all worn out, and the bit where you put the hay is broke, and Adam gave a magisterial cough. Art thou a witch? Viva Espana? He repeated. The sister looked at Pepper's face and decided not to chance it. No, she decided. It was a very good torture, everyone agreed. The trouble was getting the putative witch off it. It was a hot afternoon, and the Inquisitorial Guard felt that they were being put upon. I don't see why me and my brother Brian should have to do all the work, said Brother Wensleydale, wiping the sweat off his brow. I reckon it's time she got off and we had a go. Benedictine in a decanter. Why have we stopped? Demanded the suspect, water pouring out of her shoes. It had occurred to the Chief Inquisitor during the researches that the British Inquisition was probably not yet ready for the reintroduction of the Iron Maiden and the choke pear. Oh, the choke pear is a fun one.
Not familiar with that one.
If I'm remembering the right one correctly, it's like a pear-shaped object at the end of a rod that they put down your throat, and then you crank a gear or you push a button, and the pear shape opens outward. It can go in either end, to put it simply. I think that's right. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. But there is one that goes. They put it in your butt and then they twist it out and they make it choke pear. But I think this one goes down the throat too. Yeah, it is that one. It's also called the Pear of Anguish. Or choke pear is a modern name, a type of instrument displayed some museums consisting of a metal body, divided. Yeah, so you twist it and little spoon-like openings spread around the pear part, and it's just used to unpleasantly widen the areas it's inserted into. You get that internal stretching.
It does sound unpleasant.
Yeah. But yeah, especially if it goes in your mouth, because your mouth isn't meant to widen that very far.
I mean, they also did like the hot lead thing, which, nah, that would kill.
I mean, they might heat up too. I wouldn't put it past them. I found a picture here.
Nah, I don't need a picture.
Well, it's not a picture of it going into somebody. It's just what the device looks like. Oh yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the rack was always like the big one because that one,
Easy to do.
yeah, and it always left people crippled because it would break the growth plate,
Mm-hmm.
so it could never heal.
Yeah, I think this one, they basically went for busting the jaw. The one that always made me squirm was the one they put at your neck, and it's basically just two forks that go against your chest and your chin, and so you have to keep your head in a certain position, because if you move your chin or your chest in any movement, all it does is prod at you, and they're sharp enough that they can pierce the skin. But you have to stay in a standing position, so you can't like fall asleep because your head will droop. And so it's just like you gotta keep your head fixed in this position without it digging into your skin. It's always a nasty time. Torture. Let's see, where are we? Now, the Iron Maiden and their choke pair, but an illustration of a medieval ducking stool suggested that it was tailor made for the purpose. All you needed was a pond and some planks and a rope. This was the sort of combination that always attracted them, who never had much difficulty in finding all three. The suspect was now green to the waist. "It's just like a seesaw," she said. "Whee!" "I'm going to go home unless I can have a go," muttered Brother Brian. "Don't see why evil witches should have all the fun." "It's not allowed for inquisitors to be tortured too," said Chief Inquisitor sternly, but without much real feeling. It was a hot afternoon. The inquisitorial robes of old sacking were scratching and smelled of stale barley, and the pond looked astonishingly inviting. All right," he said, and turned to the suspect. "You're a witch, all right. Don't do it again. And now you get off and let someone else have a turn. Olay," he added.
Don't do it again.
Yep, don't do it again. Don't be a witch again. "What happens now?" said Pepper's sister. Adam hesitated. Setting fire to her would probably cause no end of trouble, he reasoned. Besides, she was too soggy to burn. He was also distantly aware that at some future point there would be questions asked about muddy shoes and duckweed-encrusted pink dresses, and that was the future, and it lay on the other end of a long, warm afternoon that contained planks and ropes and ponds. The future could wait. We'll let you off with a warning today, bitch. The future came and went, in the mildly discouraging way that futures do. Although Mr. Young had other things on his mind apart from muddy dresses, and merely banned Adam from watching TV, which meant he had to watch it on the old black and white set in his bedroom. "I don't see why we should have a hose pipe ban," said Adam. Adam heard Mr. Young telling Mrs. Young. "I pay my rates like everyone else. The garden looks like the Sahara Desert. I'm surprised there was any water left in the pond. I blame it on the lack of nuclear testing myself. You should get proper summers when you used to get proper summers when I was a boy. It used to rain all the time." That global warming sure hasn't been a problem for the last 40 years. Anyways, now Adam slouched alone along the dusty lane. It was a good slouch. Adam had a way of slouching along that offended all right-thinking people. Wasn't that he just allowed his body to droop? He could slouch with inflections. And now, the set of his shoulders reflected the hurt and bewilderment of those unjustly thwarted in their selfless desire to help his fellow men. Dust hung heavy on the bushes. Serve everyone right if the witches took over the whole country and made everyone eat health food and not go to church and dance around with no clothes on, he said. Kicking a stone, he had to admit that, except perhaps for the health food, the prospect wasn't too worrying. I bet if they'd just let us get started properly, we could have found hundreds of witches, he told himself, kicking a stone. I bet old Torturimata didn't have to give up just when he was getting started just because some stupid witch got her dress dirty. Dog slouched along dutifully behind his master. This wasn't insofar as the hellhound had any expectations what he had imagined life would be like in the last days before Armageddon, but despite himself he was beginning to enjoy it. He heard his master say, "Bet even the Victorians didn't force people to have to watch black and white television." Form shapes nature. There were certain ways of behavior appropriate to small, scruffy dogs, which are in fact welded into the genes. You can't just become small dog-shaped and hope to stay the same person. A certain intrinsic small dogness begins to permeate your very being. He'd already chased a rat. It had been the most enjoyable experience of his life. Serve him right. If we're all overcome by evil forces, his master grumbled. And then there were the cats, thought Dog. He'd surprised the huge ginger cat from next door and had attempted to reduce it to a cowering jelly by means of the usual glowing stare and deep-throated growl, which had always worked on the damned in the past. This time they earned him a whack on the nose that had made his eyes water. Cats, Dog considered, were clearly a lot tougher than lost souls. He was looking forward to a further cat experiment, which he'd planned would consist of jumping around and yapping excitedly at it. It was a long shot. It might just work. It just better not come running to me when old Pikey is turned into a frog. That's all, muttered Adam. It was at that point that the two facts dawned on him. One was that his disconsolate footsteps had led him past Jasmine's cottage. The other was that someone was crying. Adam was a soft touch for tears. He hesitated a moment, then cautiously peered over the hedge. Anathema, sitting in a deck chair and halfway through a packet of Kleenex, it looked like the rise of a small, disheveled sun. Adam doubted that she was a witch. Adam had a very clear mental picture of a witch. The Youngs restricted themselves to the only possible choice amongst the better class of Sunday newspaper, and so 100 years of enlightened occultism had passed Adam by. She didn't have a hooked nose or warts, and she was young. Well, quite young. That was good enough for him. "Hello," he said, unslouching. She blew her nose and stared at him. What was looking over the hedge should be described at this point. What Anathema saw was, she later said, something like a prepubescent Greek god, or maybe a biblical illustration, one which showed muscular angels doing some righteous smiting. It was a face that didn't belong in the 20th century. It was thatched with golden curls which glowed. Michelangelo could have sculpted it. He probably would have not included the battered sneakers, frayed jeans, or grubby t-shirt, though. "Who are you?" he said. "I'm Adam Young," said Adam. "I live just down the lane." "Oh, yes, I've heard of you," said Anathema, dabbing at her eyes. Adam preened. "Mrs. Henderson said I was to be sure to keep an eye out for you," she went on. "I'm well known around here," said Adam. "She said you were born to hang," said Anathema. Adam grinned. Notoriety wasn't as good as fame, but was heaps better than obscurity. "Said you were the worst of the lot of them," said Anathema, looking a little more cheerful, and Adam nodded. He said, "You watch out for them, miss. They're nothing but a pack of ringleaders, and Adam Young's full of the old Adam," he said. "What have you been crying for?" Adam said bluntly. "Oh, I've just lost something," said Anathema. "A book." "I'll help you look for it if you like," said Adam gallantly. I know quite a lot about books, actually. I wrote a book once. It was a terrific book. It was nearly 8 pages long. It was about this pirate who was a famous detective, and I drew the pictures." And then, in a flash of Largus, he added, "If you like, I'll let you read it. I bet it was a lot more exciting than any book you've lost. Especially the bit in the spaceship where the dinosaur comes out and fights with cowboys. I bet it'd cheer you up, my book. It cheered up Brian no end. He said he'd never been so cheered up." "Thank you. I'm sure your book is a very good book," he said, endearing herself to Adam forever. "But I don't need you to help look for my book. I think it's too late now." She looked thoughtfully at Adam. "I expect you know this area very well," she said. "For miles and miles," said Adam. "You haven't seen 2 men in a black car?" said Anathema. "Did they steal it?" said Adam, suddenly full of interest. Spoiling a gang of international book thieves would make a rewarding end to the day. "Not really. Sort of. I mean, they didn't mean to. They were looking for the manor, but I went up there today, and no one knows anything about them. There was some sort of accident, or something, I believe." Oh, body is telling me it's getting late.
Sounds like it.
I'll finish this chapter. She stared at Adam. There was something odd about him, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She just had an urgent feeling that he was important and shouldn't be allowed to drift away. Something about him. "What's the book called?" said Adam. "The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter." "Which?" said Anathema. "Which what?" "No, which? Like in Macbeth," said Anathema. "I saw that," said Adam. "It was really interesting, the way them kings carried on. Gosh, what's nice about 'em?" Nice used to mean, well, precise, or exact. Definitely something strange. A sort of laid-back intensity. You started to feel that if he was around, then everyone else, even the landscape, was just a background. He'd been here for a month. Except for Mrs. Henderson, who, in theory, looked after the cottage and probably went through her things given half a chance. She hadn't exchanged more than a dozen real words with anyone. She let them think she was an artist. This was the kind of countryside that artists liked. Actually, it was bloody beautiful. Just around this village, it was superb. If Turner and Landseer had met Samuel Palmer in a pub and worked it all out, and then got Stubbs to do the horses, it couldn't have been better. And that was depressing, because this was where it was going to happen. According to Agnes, anyways, in a book which she, Anathema, had allowed to be lost. She had the file cards, of course, but they just weren't the same. If Anathema had been in full control of her own mind at the moment, and no one around Adam was ever in full control of his or her own mind, she'd have noticed that whenever she tried to think about him beyond a superficial level, her thoughts slipped away like a duck off water. Wicked, said Adam, who had been turning over in his mind the implications of a book of nice and accurate prophecies. It tells you who's going to win the Grand National, does it? No, said Anathema. Any spaceships in it? Not many, said Anathema. Robots, said Adam hopefully. Sorry. Doesn't sound very nice to me, then, said Adam. I don't see what the future's got in it if there's no robots or spaceships. About 3 days, thought Anathema glumly. That's what it's got in it. Would you like a lemonade? She said. Adam hesitated. Then he decided to take the bull by the horn. Look, excuse me for asking, if it's not a personal question, but are you a witch? Anathema narrowed her eyes. So much for Mr. Henderson poking around. People might say so, she said. Actually, I'm an occultist. Oh, well, that's all right then, said Adam, cheering up. They looked him up and down. You know what an occultist is, do you? Oh yes, said Adam confidently. Well, so long as you're happier now, said Anathema. Come in. I could do with a drink myself. And Adam Young? Yes. You were thinking nothing wrong with my eyes. They don't need examining, weren't you? Who, me? Said Adam guiltily. I think we'll stop here. That's a good place to pause.
End of the chapter?
It's kind of the end of the section.
Segment. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of the end of the segment.
That works.
Well, actually, there's probably one more. No, because they got it broken up where they like jump scenes, but not really chapters. But yeah, we're about a third of the way, and I think this is a good stopping. We're just a little shy of 3 hours, but it's a good stopping.
That's fine. Yeah.
That kind of occultist, yes. All right, well, thank you everybody who stopped by to watch and to chat and to keep us entertained while we got through this book. How are you liking it so far, Shae?
I'm enjoying it. It's kinda got that British humor feel.
Gaiman is very good with doing weird humor stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny too when I think, because there was a British comedy that my sensei back when liked to watch. So whenever like he had his like students over to celebrate or hang out, he'd have that on, and that was always funny. It's a different kind of funny, but it was funny.
The British humor is very acquired. I always enjoy it, and like one of the things I like about this book especially is, like I was telling you earlier, it's like Gaiman is very good about deliberately writing things. Something that's mentioned offhanded chapters before have a way have a way of rounding back into another unrelated conversation, and then you're like, Oh, that's where that. Oh, I get it. That's funny. And it's like we had a moment there where it happened. It was it just happened. I think Adam brought it up. It was something that had gotten mentioned offhanded by Crowley and Aziraphale, where they were talking about it, and then he was just like, "Oh, you did this," and they're like, "Yep, that's a thing." And it's like, yeah, that happened. It's much funnier in the book than my retelling because I'm tired.
Nah, that's fine.
But yeah, it's always funny the way things come back around. Even the nun, because it's like, yeah, it's like you were like, are we ever gonna see these people again? Why are they important? And then sure enough, it's like, there she is. She's back, and she made the little toesy woesies again. Yeah,
All right.
but it's a good story. I like Anathema's a fun character too.
Seems like she would be.
Yeah, Adam's a little shit, but he's like, it's not your fault you're a little shit because you're the antichrist. But yeah, that's where we're gonna wrap up. I believe outro is streaming right now, so let's go check out what he's doing. I think he was playing Near Automata. Oh, maybe he's not. Well, we'll go raid Wan because she raided us last time, and they're playing Human Fall Flat, which is pretty neat. Um, Even if folks don't stick around because it's a little laggy on her game, but give them some love. Tell them we said hi, and we'll be back tomorrow to play Descent into Avernus, another Hellbound game.
Yep.
Yep. So you all have a great
Going to
night.
hell.
You all have a great night.
Night,
We'll see you
everyone.
later. Thanks for stopping by again, Stefan. We'll see you around. Well, bye.
Night.